History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
From the church to the streets, and even in the suites, and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom.
Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Fannie Lou's Classroom on a wonderful Thursday afternoon. So we invite you to come get some of this different kind of lunch on today that can feed your soul and your spirit, that you might be made better when you leave out of this classroom on today. We are so excited about the show we have on today. It's really going to be an extension, really unplanned, but a very nice extension of what we talked about last week when we had Tamara Davis with us, as we talked about African spirituality and the connections that we have and how we have to see ourselves as part of this African diasporic community, understand that we show up in many and varied ways, that we're not a monolith of people. And as Dr. Jeremiah Wright would say, that the difference is not a deficit. And we can't allow others on the outside to make us feel that way. And so what does it mean to embrace fully who we are? And for some of us, it's returning and reclaiming. And some, it's just learning and unlearning. And so we had an amazing conversation on last week. If you missed it, make sure you go back and watch it and share it. And speaking of sharing, make sure you share Fannie Lou's Classroom, like us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, like our YouTube channel, and make sure you hit the notification bell so you can be alerted when we go live. And so as always, thank you for your support of Fannie Lou's Classroom. We're excited about this season 2. We feel it's off to a great start. Sure, you think it's off to a great start?
Awesome.
So, of course, we have our amazing team always handling the business. We have Brooke, who is our engineer, who keeps us looking good on the camera, has that sound good for you. So let's give a shout out to Brooke and Roche for being our engineers. Yes. Much love. And then, of course, always grateful for Cheryl and Shanika, who round out our team. We're a small but mighty team of women who run Fannie Lou's Classroom. They make sure I stay on point and that I'm prepared to manage the classroom. So let's give it up for Cheryl and Shanika. And so as we always like to do, we always take just a minute or two just to talk about maybe a hot issue that we want to be aware of, make you aware of. You may be aware of it already, but to also go a little deeper about the issue, do more research about the issue, and not just take what you see perhaps on TV or maybe that one news source that you read. How do you expand your sources? It's so much misinformation and disinformation out there. It's so important that we do our due diligence to make sure before we share information on Facebook and repost, reshare, that we make sure that we're reposting and resharing the correct information, because there's so much out there. And speaking of disruption, last Wednesday, Reverend Al Sharpton and Bishop Rudolph McKissick Jr., those of you at Friendship West know Bishop McKissick pretty well. He does our Transform a Life Revival every summer in July, led a march in Tallahassee, Florida, to counter Governor DeSantis and his ongoing onslaught of trying to erase. I'm not saying how he's trying to erase Black history in public schools and even in colleges and universities in the state of Florida. He's not alone, because we have our own issues right here in Texas, but we're going to talk about Florida today because that's the most recent action that happened. So as we know, most recently, he rejected the new advanced placement courses in African American studies. So last month, he rejected the proposed AP multidisciplinary study of the African American diaspora that includes literature, the arts, science, politics, and geography. And we have to understand, ask the question, and ask Mary Davis, we talked about this on last week's show, ask ourselves the questions: why are they so intent on erasing your history? Why are they so intent on making sure you don't know who you are and from which you came? Because what does it mean for you to know that you're scientists, that you're mathematicians, that you come from the Dogon people who looked up and understood the earth was round long before Copernicus had a telescope? It's a reason why he is doing this. And our Governor Abbott, unfortunately, is just as bad. And it's so critical in Texas because when textbooks are published, because we're such a large purchaser of textbooks, whatever comes through Texas goes throughout the nation. Other school districts buy that book. So it's so important for us to make sure we stay on top of this and not brush it off or believe the hype, the disinformation that when we have these courses, it makes little white children feel bad. That's not what it does. Because here's the reality. If you are a white parent, you don't want your child to feel bad about understanding the horrors of enslavement, or you don't want black children to understand that they come from something great, you can always teach your white children to be on the side of abolitionists. They don't have to be on the side of the enslaver. They got options. So I think we have to make sure that we do not fall into that trap. And we believe by teaching these courses that somehow we make our children feel inferior, because that's not the case. If you are teaching in a way that makes your child feel inferior from history, then you're teaching the wrong history. Because long before enslavement, we were a strong and mighty people. And so that's not what the show is about today. But I wanted to make sure that we not forget the struggle and what's happening and going on every day as we go about daily. There are, I'm going to use Walter Wink's language, dominant systems that are ensuring that some type of activity is going on that continues to erase who we are as a people, and we cannot allow that to happen. We have to not only live for it, but we have to be very diligent about fighting policy and law, but at the same time, we also have to tap into what we already have at our disposal: retired educators, academics, people who are bearers and carriers of wisdom and history, how we use our own control spaces, i.e. churches, to open up and have our own schools, to educate our own children around their history. Because it's so important, it's just critical. If we don't understand where we came from, we're not going to know where we're going. So we must go back and make sure we reclaim what that history is. Teach it to our children. It's that Sankofa moment, right? That bird looking back, because it's something worth grabbing and retaining while we know there's a future we have to look forward to. So just want to make sure I mention that on today. Make sure that we stay connected to this issue. It's not just Florida, it's Texas, South Carolina. There are other states who are also following suit to make sure there's an erasure of who we are, and we simply cannot allow that to happen, or at least we need to go down fighting. We certainly can't just sit there and let it happen and then just say, oops, oh well, because by the time you look up, it'll be too late. Today is the education. Tomorrow it's going to be something else. So we absolutely have to show that we're willing to fight for our own story and our own narrative. So that's all I have for the class on today, but we're going to, because this also lends itself to the conversation today, because the way in which they're erasing us from history, we also want to talk about the ways in which Africans and Black folks have been erased from the origins of Christianity. So we want to make sure we have a robust conversation on today, and we can have that because we have not only a scholar in the house, but we also have someone who's not just in the ivory tower. She's actually part of the church. You know, some people like to write about the church, but they've never touched the church. So we have somebody who's both things. I think it's important to not only study, to research, to write, and think critically about where we are, but you also got to be a part of the life of the church. Because we want to make sure that spirit, right, is really moving, and we're in tune with that spirit, that good energy, that we can really feed our souls, that we have, particularly where we have soul trauma. As it relates to whether it's psychological, whether it's emotional, whether it's from dominant systems, whether it's, economic oppression, whatever it is, something has to feed that soul and nurture our soul. And we're going to do that on today.
That's right.
So if you Christian, you Black and Christian in particular, this is going to be for you for sure, because we have to find the ways in which we tap into and make sure we are not leaning into a westernized version of Christianity that really does not serve us, but it keeps us subservient and oppressed. And let me move on before I get into what we're going to talk, because I have a scholar and an expert to talk about that today. So she is not just a scholar. She is my friend and my soror. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So let me introduce Dr. Tamara Lewis. I'm going to read her short bio, but read her extended bio in our, description box?
Yes.
In our description box, we have a full bio of Dr. Tamara Lewis. But let me just give you the short version of her bio so you know who we are having a conversation with on today. And I always make sure, in that chat, you can always type your questions, comments in the comments section. Dr. Tamara E. Lewis is a professor of the practice of historical theology and director of the Black and Africana Church Studies Program at Perkins School of Theology at Southern Methodist University here in Dallas, Texas. She received her PhD in historical studies from Vanderbilt University, is an ordained elder in the Tennessee Conference of United Methodist Church. She is a board member of the Wesley Works Project a member of the editorial board of the Methodist Review. She real Methodist. You Methodist through and through. And a faculty mentor of the United Methodist Women of Color Scholars Program. See, boom. She is a member of the steering committee of the Women in Religions unit of the American Academy of Religion. See, scholar, AAR. Y'all got to look that up. Write that down while you take your notes. Make a note and go back and read about what that is. Because it's important, right, Dr.
Yes,
Lewis, to
very
know
much
what that
so.
is and who, right. We're going to
That's
talk
right.
about that. Dr. Lewis is an author of several peer-reviewed articles and contributed to edited volumes. She is also the editor of the upcoming volume of Black Church Studies for the Black and Africana Church Studies Program, and of another upcoming publication through Perkins Bridwell Press for BACS, Black Africana Church Studies Program, and Black Seminarians Association.
Yes.
Let's welcome my friend, my sister, my soror, Dr. Tamara Lewis of Fannie Lewis Classroom.
Hey there. Thank you
Yes.
so much for having me. It's such a blessing to be in this wonderful energy, this wonderful space where we love each other as Black women, as a Black community, and we're honoring a saint, our saint, Fannie Lou Hamer. So,
Come on, sainthood. Come
Hallelujah.
on. Hallelujah. That's
Yes.
our mother.
She is.
Queen Mother.
She is.
Fannie Lou Hamer. Yes.
She is our mother. We honor her. Her spirit is with us.
Yes.
And she is in my heart because
Come on now.
she was a witness, a martyr for us.
That's right.
She gave her and dedicated her life for us and our struggle, and what she represents to our community means so much. And I think whenever we have an opportunity, just to remember her and honor
Yes.
her, right? And
Absolutely.
just lift up her name.
Absolutely.
She's with us.
That's right.
And she helps us with her energy and spirit. I believe in the power and the energy of the ancestors.
Absolutely. Oh, what? Come on now.
Yes.
Come
yes.
on now.
That's the only way we gonna make it. That's the only way we gonna make it.
And why? Because energy, what? Never dies. You can't kill it.
Yes.
It's always redirected.
Yes,
so
absolutely
her
right.
spirit, absolutely her
Yes.
spirit is with, and that's how we keep her alive
Yes,
too, right? It's
yes.
through us and doing that work.
Yes.
Come on now. Come on now.
Yes.
You
And
got
in
me
the-
excited.
In the African teaching and the ancient
Yes.
Africans, they believe that as long as you say their name.
That's right.
As long as you say their name. And we do that in our community. This is an ancestral memory.
That's right.
As long as you say their name, they are alive. And they
That's
are
right.
with us. And their spirit is encouraging us and
Yes.
moving us forward.
And to your point, I think about Dr. John Henry Clark. He was doing a speaking engagement. You know how he talks, very straightforward. You know, he cuts no corners. He's not trying to preserve. He's just trying to be a truth teller, right?
Yes.
And I remember he made this comment. It's so true to what you're saying, even about Fannie Lou Hamer. He said, "Oh, I'll never die.
Ooh, Jesus.
I taught too many people.
That's-
I wrote too many books. I left too much behind. I'll never die." And that's
Yes.
Fannie Lou Hamer,
That's
right?
it.
She's
That's
left too
it.
much for us.
That's
We're always
it.
returning back to what she said,
That's
what she's
right.
done.
That's right.
Because I believe for Fannie Lou Hamer, if she was with us today, I think she would absolutely tell us the God she was serving
Yes.
was not the same God who of those police officers who turned that billy club on her.
Well,
Not the same God of those doctors who, unbeknownst to her and against her will, stripped her of her right to bear children. I guarantee you she would not say that, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So you got me starting me. But I think that's important, right?
Right.
So let me start it here. We got a lot to cover, but I want to start it here because I think this is the one thing we have to give thought to. As I talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, how I know for me, how I look at her, and Dr. Karen Crozier does an amazing job in her text. I think it's The Revolutionary Practical Theology of Fannie Lou Hamer. It's the name of her text, right? And she says, of course, we know Fannie Lou Hamer dropped out of school. Right? Sharecropper.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mississippi.
And we talking about Mississippi. You know. And how and Dr. Karen Crozier says she had a very well developed theology
She absolutely did.
of who God was, of Jesus and justice, land and labor, and the Holy Spirit. Right? And so, and how she didn't bash the church, but she absolutely critiqued the church.
Right.
Because she believed they did too much acquiescing. that they allowed the white folks to run them too much. So that's why I'm so clear about, she understood a version
Yes, she did.
of Christianity was not like the dominant society.
That's right.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about, because I know this is also part of the work that you do, and I guess I'll do it this way. I used to love watching Good Times.
Yes.
So, we all got our favorite, well, I got several favorite episodes. But one in particular, as we talk about this, and you already know what I'm talking about, when Black Jesus got put on that wall that JJ painted, right? And performing the miracles, James hit that 8-ball in the corner pocket, got the money for the rent. And so, and so that exchange between Florida and Michael, when he was like, well, why, Mama? I want this Black Jesus on the wall. Because he's militant midget, so he definitely, I want to see a Jesus look like me. And when she said, well, that's the only Jesus I know and love.
That's right.
Was the white Jesus.
That's a white Jesus.
So let's talk about the power of iconography and how that is so deeply embedded in our particularly Christian tradition as Black folks, right? And how we can break free from that, because some Black folks still fight you when you talk about white Jesus.
Oh my gosh.
Or will tell you, why does it matter? Well, if it doesn't matter, why they change it?
That's right.
So let's talk about the power of iconography and how we might want to really consider why it's important.
Yes.
But one, because it's historically inaccurate. Let you talk to us.
That touches on so many levels of everything that I'm about, and really consider my teaching, my scholarship, my presence, my activism, even my embodiment is the antithesis to white Jesus. And I'll explain what I mean. But I'm so interested in that. I have my own personal traumas, as many of us do, growing up and looking at images of white Jesus, the image of white Jesus that hung in my grandmother's house, because those were all the images that were there. The images of white Jesus in the church where I attended. Later, they did remove those images. I'm aware of even many Black churches today that still have images of white Jesus. After all we've done, after all we've gone through, and even in the market, there are alternatives that did not always exist.
That's right.
Unless you were a JJ who was able to paint, but those images were not always readily available, particularly in the South where I grew up. So still, those images are there.
Yes.
And why is that, right? So you may be familiar, in 1969, Ebony magazine, in the height coming out of the civil rights movement, as you know, Martin Luther King had passed the previous year, had been assassinated. Ebony magazine came out with a cover story on which they published a Black Jesus. And this whole story, you can Google it, like Ebony magazine, Black Jesus. And there are multiple articles about this, and you can even actually see that cover. But Ebony magazine, according to the story that came out later, almost went out of business because of the thousands of Black subscribers who wrote into the magazine threatening to remove their subscriptions because of this Black Jesus, which was sacrilege or heresy. And many of them, in their letters to the editor complaining of the Black Jesus cover, included images of a white Jesus in order to remind them, this is the real image in their view of Jesus. This was 1969, and it's documented. So when I learned of that story, it hit a nerve, because I knew what it was like to grow up in a Black community that had images of white Jesus, and not just in my own local community, but the stories that we saw on television, all the Jesus movies. Jesus is not even brown. He was white. And in fact, he was British. One of the things I like to talk about in my classes is, why does Jesus always have a British accent? Does that make sense?
Not at all. Well, yes, no.
Right. I mean, it does when we understand, you know, but historically, does it make any sense? He always has a British accent. There's a reason, as we know. Exactly. But inundated with those images, because I remember as a child sitting in front of the television watching Jesus movies. I had books about Jesus, books about the Bible, everybody was white. Those images impact our minds and our psyches.
That's right.
And
Yes.
this is the thing that I'm really concerned about. We all have like our specific agenda. My ultimate agenda, of course, is the liberation of Black people from systematic, political, economic, physical oppression.
Yeah.
The angle in which I am passionate about contributing to that struggle is thinking about the way we as people of African descent have been so broken internally and psychologically
Yes.
by these
Yes.
images. And the fact that these images are not coincidental, they're not innocuous, they're not innocent. They are wielded as weapons of violence.
That's right.
Against us by a white supremacist culture that knows what they're doing.
Clear about it.
They're very clear and they know exactly what they're doing. One of the things I've noticed, even on social media, have you noticed yourself, like whenever there's a post where clearly a person of color, a person of African descent is talking about Black self-love, Black heritage, Black identity, some element, some cultural reference, some icon, right? That's just all about Black pride and Black beauty and Black excellence. And then there's commenting from other like-minded brothers and sisters, supporting that and lifting that up. Then there always seems to be someone, of the non-melanated persuasion, right? Entering into this conversation to make a comment, sort of destabilizing all of it, right? And for instance, just last night, I saw online this beautiful young brother has this gorgeous afro. And I mean, I'm talking Jackson 5, like, set, like he has probably never just really cut his hair. But he's cultivated it. Like it's beautiful. And he's posted this afro and a lot of people were just like, whoa, brother. And, a lot of the guys were like, don't make it hard on us because he was just this beautiful young man. And then someone posted then, I think afros are weird, right? And it's almost like, it's almost like the power of energy.
Yeah.
Like if, there's like a flow, like a rhythm, even in music or worship, but something can come along and just derail that. And it really seems like white supremacy is not just this large cultural force, but it has all of these like little points and pricks and like spies who are just constantly on vigilance, like, interjecting themselves into Black spaces, right? And listening in and trying to always be diligent about, how can we disrupt any kind of unity, joy. Yeah. That is very historical.
Yes.
It's historical. Talking about the Black church. Do you know that during Jim Crow years in Black churches, like especially out like in the countryside, in the rural areas, there would literally be designated white persons who would go around to Black churches. And sometimes they would stand outside if they were being polite and just listen in, just to see what the preacher is preaching, if it's too political, if it's crossing the line, if they're making comments about maybe some issue going on in the community in which the people are being oppressed. They're listening in. But the ones who are really bold would just walk right in the church.
Just walk right on in.
They would walk right on in the church. Sometimes they would walk right up and sit in the pulpit.
See.
We have the actual pictures and images.
Wow.
They would go right up in the pulpit. Like, yeah, we here and we listening. What y'all saying?
To consistently, to your point, remind us that we are over you, period.
Exactly.
Even in these spaces that are all Black.
Right.
They still belong to us.
That's right.
And I just showed you by demonstrating walking and prancing right on up to this pulpit.
Exactly.
As if nothing you hold sacred and holy.
Yes.
It's this idea of always running roughshod over everything that's holy and sacred to us. Whether that's our hair.
That's right.
Our bodies.
Our bodies.
our clothes. I mean, all of that, right? These microaggressions too, right? That just little things, to your point, that energy that comes into the space, like where you even come from.
Exactly.
Right. And I always say sometimes don't even give them that energy back, right? Just ignore, because that's what they want,
That's
right?
what they want.
To turn that into such a sparring, right? And then, sometimes, I have time. Just sometimes it's just like,
sometimes you need to. Sometimes you have to. And I've done it before, I admit, on social media, because sometimes, especially when people make, as a historian, just blatantly incorrect statements about history. And again, that misinformation and how that knowledge, that false knowledge, is propagated about our people. And it's our history.
Yeah.
I'm so excited because we are living in times that are unprecedented, and times that even our ancestors couldn't have dreamed, because, as you know, white supremacy has systematically denied, covered up, obfuscated, just literally corrupted the truth of ancestral history, and with a very particular agenda. That agenda is to maintain economic, political supremacy, and even to the point of using markers such as race, right, to designate our people as inferior, right? And so even race itself, something that we have been taught to believe is a normal and natural thing, is actually a construct.
That's right.
Right? When we think about race, we've been taught by the larger society to think, race is who I am, and it's where I'm from, it's my people, it's my identity. But no, actually, that's ethnicity, right? Our ethnic background, our people, our heritage, our genealogy. Race is a construction, right, that is built on a hierarchy from superiority to inferiority. It's a designation. And we as a people have been historically designated, right, within that system as inferior in order to maintain supremacy.
And understanding why it's so important to be, definitely justice seekers, advocates of policy and law, because it's codified in law.
Exactly.
Right? And that, was it Virginia, Maryland? I feel like it's Virginia. Who was the initial colony.
That's right.
To put into policy and law to say you are a permanent.
That's right.
Underclass. You should be a non-compensated, non-competitive.
That's right.
Permanent underclass in America.
That's absolutely right.
Now they wrote that down.
They wrote it down.
And we were saying with Asmira last week, right? We were saying some of the, don't take our word for it. They were so arrogant, narcissistic, and really evil. They wrote it down. It's right there for you to read it.
It's absolutely evil.
We don't have to imagine it and make you. And I want to go back to something else you said about the misinformation, but it's also disinformation too.
Yes, exactly.
Most now is more I'm
disinformation.
Intentionally
yes
give you all these lies.
That's right.
And we have to. When we were talking with Asmira last week, and we'll kind of shift this into what I want to talk about today, is why it's so important for us to see ourselves beyond these political man-made borders called the United States of America.
Oh, my goodness. That's so true.
Why it's so important for us to be able to embrace the many ways that we show. And I'm just using blackness I know it's a politically constructed term, socially constructed term, but when we understand what it means when we say blackness, right, that looks so different, and we need to embrace it up and against, run from it, and let white folks make you think something is wrong with it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And so I want to go all the way back to, and let me say this. I took a class from you. I don't know if you remember. I took a class from you in seminary when I was getting my MDiv.
Yes.
And it was called Pan-African Christian Resistance.
That's right.
And that's where I learned more and more about the origins of Christianity. You know how you just know things because of what you've read? So I really want to talk about that.
Okay.
Because a lot of us still believe it started here or white folks gave it to us.
Oh, my gosh.
So let's talk about, because that's the title of the show today, is how Africa shaped Christianity.
Right.
And I know this is your thing, right? You can really unpack this for us and give people nuggets for them to go and do more research on.
Absolutely.
And to think more deeply about it. Because I think that is something we definitely have to reclaim, even here in America, in our churches, in our pulpits,
Absolutely.
if we are going to really deal with these dominating systems that are over us, right? because it's not going to do you well to make pretend like we shouldn't be engaged because we're Christian. God's going to take care of it. And then we're called to show love, because we can unpack what it means to show love. And biblically, like, this theology of love is not what y'all touted out to be.
Right. That's
so talk to us a little bit. Well, and I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna let you I'm gonna let you just run with it. I remember I was in class. I feel like it was when I was working on my MDiv, and the question was, can you all think of any African church fathers and early thinkers? I'm like, well, you just mentioned one, Augustine, Tertullian, that they were North African, right? But even where we know we have a foothold and a footprint, that's erased in a way to just make them seem racially ambiguous, right?
Exactly.
So talk to us about the ways in which Africa indeed has shaped Christianity.
Yes.
And I'm going to say there's one thing you taught me in class. I didn't know this, that St. Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, so talk about us about St. Mark. And
yes.
Then I'll follow up with a question, but just kind of give us that kind of landscape.
Well, as you mentioned, this really is my passion, and I have had to do a lot of deconstruction because I did get a PhD through the White Academy.
Right,
I mean,
right,
that's
right.
all of our major institutions are coming through that lens. So what's interesting is I was taught white church history, right? And that's what I call it, and that's what it is. Mm-hmm. Even in the areas in which we now know folks were Black, they were dark. They were dark and brown-skinned people, and we actually have documented historical evidence of this. Traditionally, down through the tradition, and particularly after Europeans began to incorporate the tradition, but also particularly after the Enlightenment in the 19th century, when it became the agenda, right, to occlude the past and history of dark people, African people, in the pursuit of white supremacy. So it was very, very intentional. They began to hide this, and they began to just erase, whitewash history. Mm-hmm. But there are so many persons who are deeply active in the early church who are Black folk. But first of all, I want to go back even to an earlier way of thinking about the history of Israel. Israel is on something we're not taught, is on the African tectonic plate. Mm-hmm. And the further that you go back in African history, which is in Kemet, so my passion is not only in the early church, but it's also in the precursors to early Christianity. Because what I have discovered in research is so many of the themes and the ideas and the teachings are rooted in Africa.
Yes, right.
And Africa itself is connected to Israel. And in fact, Ancient Kemet, whom the Greeks and the Europeans called Egypt, which was not the name that the indigenous people called themselves. That is so important for us to understand. That if we were to go back in time, 3,000 years, and mingle around the people who actually founded the conversation, and we were miraculously able to speak in their language, they would not have been calling themselves Egyptians. Mm-hmm. Egypt is a colonized term. It was a term that developed out of the occupation. Mm-hmm. It does arise out of a phrase, actually a temple that existed in Memphis. I think that's very significant because of the history of Memphis. I've been ruminating over this and the actions that have been going on in the city of Memphis. One of the cities in which here in the United States where I grew up in Memphis, one of the cities I spent time during my childhood. But Egypt is not what the people would have called themselves. And so that's so important. The people would have called themselves the people of Kemet, which was the Black land. Right. We see this all over the iconography, all over the inscriptions, all over the statuary. Other word they have for their land is the two lands, because when the country was merged, it was the North and the South, or what is commonly called Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, right? But it was two lands that were unified and went on to become an empire. This empire would actually cover the area we now call the Middle East or Palestine. Okay. So all of this area was part of the Ancient Kemetic Empire. And the people in that area we now call Israel, the land of Jesus. Later, all of that area, those people would have considered themselves Kemetic people, and an extension of Kemetic people were the Canaanites, who are mentioned in the Bible, right? Even when you look in Genesis and the Table of Nations, Canaan is the son of Ham. Ham is associated, of course, with Africa, and Ham is also another word for Kim or Kemet, right? So this is how all of these things come together. But you mentioned, I want to step back, that just like a broad kind of overview of Africa and Israel and how these lands are actually Africa.
Yeah.
They become politicized, right, in terms of geography. And we know that geography is a political tool. And so at some point in our history, Israel and the Middle East was separated from Africa. And there is a scholar at the Interdenominational Theological Center by the name of Randall Bailey, who does exegesis scholarship of the Hebrew Bible. And his work is revolutionary, very inspiring to me. He has a number of articles in publications, but particularly there is a recent article that is a celebratory edition. It's the 30th anniversary expanded edition of Stony the Road We Trod. You may have heard of Beyond Identification, the Use of Africans in Old Testament Poetry and Narratives. And Dr. Bailey breaks down the historical cover-up, so to speak, of the connection between Hebrew history and African history. So he analyzes and surveys Bible dictionaries, concordances, maps, going back to the 19th century, right, that were used consistently as study aids in Bible studies, for references for pastors and preachers as they're preparing sermons, and other scholars. The whole trajectory of these study aids somehow mysteriously go into a lot of detail about the Middle East and the Near East, Arabia, and Africa's nowhere to be seen. Sometimes there's a little sliver of so-called Egypt, right? But systematically, you see no historical connection. When ironically, Israel, we know geographically is connected to this part of the land. So as Dr. Bailey demonstrates, this is not coincidence, right? This is intentional. This is part of an agenda that even Bible scholars were aware of, the necessity of cutting out Africa from biblical history, from world history, and to think about it just in really straightforward, pragmatic terms. What was going on in the 19th century? What was going on in the early 20th century? Africa as a continent was colonized by the European powers.
Right.
How do you maintain colonization? How do you maintain subjugation of an entire continent? Well, it's not just military force, which is part of it. Right. It's not just political domination, exploitation. It's mental control. It's the control of the mind. And part of that mental control is to brainwash and teach people, deny them their history, to create genocide on whole populations who are connected to their history, right? And then to bring in younger populations who haven't had the benefit of the knowledge of their elders because they've been separated, right, from their heritage and from their people, and brainwash them. Brainwash them into thinking that your continent had no history, your people had no history, that Europeans are the architects of humanity.
And so talk to us about where, and then, because I think what you're saying also speaks to, and maybe you can tell us about how in that, I don't know what you want to call it, I guess we could just use brainwashing for now, how, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I would imagine that our ancestors that inherited that land at that point, who lived on the land, that they very connected, that there was no separation of their political, economic, military, like somewhere in here that God was always there and a part of it. Because, you know, you can correct me, like, I also believe part of the African worldview is that God is everywhere.
Yes.
So God is not contained in this building. What you mean God is in that building over there? Or, you know, that whole thing with borders. What you mean? Grandma, you know, we buried her over there. You tell me I can't cross this line without having this, because that's a different country. So talk to us about, because I want to then get to how, in terms, I guess you can help me with the timeline here. I know because I thought it was important. I like how you took us back to the precursor or the pre-runner.
Absolutely.
So what we now know is Christianity in the way. So talk about the ways in which even how they viewed God, how they had their own way of worship of the divine.
Absolutely.
How we shaped that.
Right. Okay. Yes.
And then how that was then distorted.
Yes. That is really there. There is so much there, and in fact, I'm completing an article for the Black Africana Church Studies Program, and in that research, I've uncovered so much. So the first thing I want to say, and at least in thinking about theological and spiritual precursors of Christianity. First of all, the notion of death and resurrection, of new life, of the cyclical nature of life, and all of that goes back to Africa. Mm-hmm. It is documented. Okay, so it's in the literature. It's something about our ancient ancestors. It's almost like they foreknew that later the history would be stolen. Because if you may know, the etymology of the word paper goes to papyrus, which is a plant in Africa in which our ancestors used to actually write. Well, this is a paper that only lasts for a certain period of time, and it just naturally decomposes. So you have to recopy things. And one of the things our ancestors did, even with that knowledge, they use papyrus all the time, but they recognize that we need something permanent. And when you go to Ancient Kemet, even to this day, the monuments that are still standing, it's written in the stone. They knew. It's almost like they knew that lies would be stolen, that our history would be stolen, and as much as has been stolen, there's still enough evidence that gives us so much knowledge. So our people were very much connected to the land. And one of the reasons why that powerful nation that became known as Kemet, the Black Land, is that the Nile in that region, which is almost exclusively desert, right? The Red Land. And they even use this language in their inscriptions, Red Land, Black Land, right? So Red Land, and even today, if you go into that part of East Africa, go into the world, go into the desert and walk into the desert for a while. Go into the Sahara, the Red Land. You will understand how our ancient ancestors understood that to be the land of death. There's no water for, miles and miles and miles. But the gift of the Nile was the Black Land. This was the water that rolled down from the heart of Africa, that rolled down into what becomes Kemet, and with the soil pulling up the nutrients from the water, it will flow over into the land, and that land immediately connected to the Nile becomes the Black Land. This Black Land, even to this day, is so fertile that when the people who were actually running away from famine discovered this Black Land, they realized that, oh my God, they could just plant a seed and it would grow, right? The fertility and the power of the Black Land. So Blackness became metaphorically associated with life, with divinity. And this notion of the seed going into the earth, dying and resurrecting, this becomes part of the early myth and theology. So when they thought about God and divinity, they thought about a God who loves the people so much that the God is manifest, yes, in heaven, but also in earth. And in the earth, God is literally the bounty that keeps us alive. God is our sustenance, right? And so they're developing myths around this. They're also associating the Blackness with their own Black bodies. And they're seeing the divinity in their own Black bodies. So something that's connected to the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament, something I think is so important for us to talk about in Black churches, is that one of the early narratives among the ancient Africans, because Kemet became a powerful nation, but before Kemet, these stories and myths existed all among the people deep in Africa, right? So one of the early myths is a story about a potter deity, right? And this potter deity was God. They were imagining God and how God operates. And they were saying God is like a potter, right? Because this was a common occupation, right? The potter. And we're familiar with this in the Old Testament, but it's much more ancient than what the Israelites got it from the Africans, right? So the potter in the story goes down to the Black land. And this is something that happens all the time. The potter goes down to the Black land, reaches out and grabs a scoop of that Black earth, fashions the baby, puts it in the mother's womb, and then the spirit comes and breathes the breath of life, and this becomes the living being in the womb. So the Blackness was associated with the fertility and the life of the soul. Later, the Greeks would call these same people the Ethiopians. And this was a root word associated with ether. The ether represented transcendence. So there's this notion that we have later with Jesus Christ when he says, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." When you go into ancient Africa and many of these ancient pyramids and you read the ancient writings, there is a phrase that says, "As above, so below." There is a parallel, and this is what our ancient Africans envisioned. That just as that you have the Black earth, which represented fertility and abundance and was a symbol of life, death, and resurrection, also the night sky, because they pondered the skies for centuries, and they studied the moon and the stars, and they believed that the deities, that gods, that angels dwelt in the night skies. So just as there was fertility and life in the Black earth, there was fertility and life in the skies. And the Greeks who would come down and they would see the Africans and their religious rites and in their worship and their mythology, said these are the people of the gods. And Homer even writes that the gods would go to Ethiopia to dine with the people. These were the holy people. Blackness meant divinity. God is Black. And in fact, the God who represented the Black earth is called in their religious texts. We have multiple religious texts, including the Bible,
Which is an African book.
which is an African book. God is called the Great Black, or the Blackest Black.
And see, this is why this is so important, right? So you have far back you go, and then you come up. Now I'm saying up in time, but it's distant from us today. But Bishop Henry Mill Turner, who they tried to throw out the AME church because he said God is a Black
Negro.
man. Yeah,
That's
God
right.
is a Negro.
That's right.
So again, the connections are there, and this is what I mean. That's why I'm over here fascinated. Though I'm learning so much today. I'm in class, thank you, but I don't have to write the paper, so that's the difference.
That's right.
So I think that's what is so important for people to hear that.
Right.
So it is also for me is when you say you're Black and Christian, own that.
Own that.
And own that lineage
That's
of
right.
Christianity that was shaped, formed, and fashioned
That's right.
in the Black land.
It was literally fashioned in the Black land.
And I tell people all the time, and someone said it this way, I put it another way, this person said it this way, it's like the academic exercise is not finding the Black folks in the Bible, it's finding the Europeans.
It really is, because where are they? They are not there. I mean, I hate to say it, they're further, what we would call geographically up north.
Yeah.
They're not making their way down until much later.
Much later. In John Thornton's book, I mentioned this last.
Yes, I love John Thornton.
I know it because I was in your class. That's how I know. And now this is the way I say it. He didn't say it this way, but I say long before the Europeans even learned how to navigate the waters, we were gone. We were centuries ahead.
We were circumnavigating the globe.
And I already knew it was round. Before Perkins had his telescope, the
absolutely.
Dogon people, that astronomy and mathematicians and astronomy, which is why DeSantis doesn't want you to know about the arts and the sciences.
It does not want you.
Because you're going to learn this stuff about your people. And what does that do to young black boys, young black girls?
Absolutely. It's a mental prison.
Exactly.
They know what
they're doing. And that's why we can't brush it off, because it's connected to everything you just said.
This is why we have to be subversive.
Yeah.
We have to do it in our churches and in our communities. Historically, this information has been kept from us, right? But we are in the age of information, right? Scholars, we have access.
Yes.
These images, something that happened, I sort of had like a kind of epiphany, and when I just began to systematically go through and catalog images that prior to this time were just hidden in museums all over the world, right? But now, and there are some good other colored folk, because they are taking pictures and digitizing these images at times. Maybe they don't know why they're doing it.
Yeah.
I believe the Holy Spirit is moving, and they don't even know why they're doing it. But these images are now digitized all over the internet. I've gone through and categorized. And when you realize that there is still a narrative in scholarly circles called Egyptology, and even the modern Egyptians who are in occupied land of our ancestors, who want to deny that these people were black.
That's right. Yes.
And this is very much alive.
I'm glad you said, you remember Huda? Is that how you pronounce her name on which show? She's on Good Morning America. I know who you're talking about.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, and somebody,
Hulda, I know exactly who you're talking about.
And
yes.
Somebody called her black. And her thing was, no, they called her African. And her initial response, I'm not African, I'm Egyptian.
Well,
and so to where you're going, but just because I'm just showing, to your point, that this erasure, and I'm telling people all day, I'm like, now, people can lie, they can redraw lines all they want to.
Right.
But look at your map.
That's right.
Because they can't remake the land. God done laid that thing down, you can't change it. So you really believe all this blackness.
That's right.
In some kind of way.
That's right.
This one, and even, and you see it today I was reading, maybe it was The Economist. It was, some, and it's always when they do the world, Caribbean, Africa, and Egypt. Even still. And to your point about the Middle East, that's a strictly geopolitical term.
Absolutely.
No such thing.
No such thing.
And so I love how you're doing it, because I think that's why it's important for us to see it, because then you start seeing, so yes, as Africans, as black folks, we have always been there. It's not some far-fetched, far-off people that we can't connect. All that they're saying, them black people.
So let me tell you, that narrative is so powerful.
Yeah.
And this is the power of narrative, because even when I began my research, I know the Egyptians were black, but I started reading some of the Egyptology myself. And I'm like, that's how convincing and thorough, because it's just like white supremacy. It's a very powerful geopolitical, and it's an economy, because they're digging up the graves of our ancestors. This is big bucks for them, right? They're always digging.
Always dig, right.
And so I even got kind of confused and conflicted, because I've been doing this research for the past 2 or 3 years. And then I began to go through and just catalog all of these images, and I have just I'm going to give you links so that our audience can go and look at these multiple images for themselves, multiple sites. That's the beauty of the internet. When you know how to find it, it really is out there.
Yeah.
But when I tell you, I went back and I just started looking, not reading anybody's historiography, not reading a scholar, not reading anybody's opinion, but just down and dirty, just historical artifacts. Honey, these folks are blacker than me, and I am beautifully melanated.
Come on now.
Right? Okay, we're talking what was so amazing about our ancestors. They appreciated our melanin, and also like the variation in tones. The mochas, the chocolates, the copper colors, even the cafe au lait. First of all humanity comes from Africa. We all originate. Our DNA originates in this
and we
continent.
know that through archaeology. So this is not just us saying it. This is proven through science.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But when I tell you about the afros, the twist, the locks, the braided extensions, the wigs. Honey, we've been doing this hair since day one. The cornrows, right? All of these styles. I was looking at this one image of this young sister. I'm definitely gonna leave the link because you got to look at it yourselves, and our audience have to see it. It's an outline of a sister. You can tell that it's a drawing on a wall. Someone's taking a picture like on a tomb. A lot of the images come from tombs and so forth. It's like you could pull her out of the wall and she would be like, a African-American teenage girl with her, just got her hair braided, I mean, this is exactly it's just, I literally got chills.
Yeah.
These are African people.
And I want to now, this is, as usual, when we get into the classroom, it's so much
It's a lot.
to share.
It's so much.
We can't get it all in.
You can't.
So I want to shift and use, how much time do we have? Who's keeping my time?
Wow.
10. Oh, good. Okay, well, we can go low.
But the one thing I wanted to share
Yes.
is when I said we were African people, I just wanted to share about the origin of the word Africa.
Yeah, please, yes, do that.
We're African. We're not allowed to know where that word comes from. That word comes from Ancient Kemetic, right? So that ancient mythology, our ancestors recognized that, yes, we are human beings, but we are part God too.
Yes,
we are
yes.
God and human. We are part divine. In other words, God resides in us. We are children of God.
That's right.
Right? So Africa, when you study the meta-netter, the white Egyptologists call it hieroglyphics, but it's the meta-netter, which essentially means holy language. And when you break down the words, Af in the meta-netter means body. Ra means God. Ka means soul. So Africa, body and soul of God.
Wow. And now, see, that makes sense, because Mama Itahari would say that our soul, from the African worldview, is that we have an immortal part of that soul.
That's right.
That existed with God before we were formed in our mother's womb.
Exactly.
It never dies. Vanloo Hamer.
Exactly.
That's why she lives on today. So this makes I never heard that breakdown before. Thank you.
Body and
but
soul
it makes
of
sense,
God.
right? And we believe and see, sometimes, I'm going to say this, I might get in trouble for this. A lot of folk, Christians, they don't read their Bible.
They don't.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But if you read it, it makes sense to you, because it also says that God breathed into the nostrils the breath of life. So how can we?
And man became a living soul. That's
so
right.
how can we not be a part?
That's right.
And I'm making you in my image and likeness. I'm going to put some things about your moving and your being.
That's right.
That's immortal.
That's right.
Right? So it just makes sense.
That's right.
So we don't read the Bible, and when we read it, either you don't believe it,
that's right,
or you're not reading. It's one of the two,
That's
and
right.
both are problematic.
That's right.
So I'm wondering also, so I want to kind of fast track this. So also, I also want people to kind of think about, as they, let's say, they may decide, let me go back and read my Bible tonight.
Please do.
But it's a particular hermeneutic we must have.
That's right.
When we do that.
That's right.
Because you're going to have to strip away that dualistic theological worldview of separation of body and soul.
That's right.
So kind of talk to us in these waning moments that we have.
Yes.
That what are some, I guess, understandings, hermeneutical lens we need to have that continue to undergird and inform Christianity today, but in the present day, right? That's going to manifest in our faith expressions. What are some things we need to think about that are carryovers? Because we talked about this with Asmira last week. It's the stuff we already do that's purely African, and we don't even know it.
That's right.
But just talk to us about, because you've laid out the precursor to Christianity and how Africa shaped the Christianity as we understand it. So just talk to people. Just, hey, when you pick this Bible up, what are some things you want them to reimagine and one, unlearn, and two, how they radically reread their text.
So thank you so much. This is actually the thing that I want to advocate so much in our churches, in our Black churches, because I believe that if we are to break free from that internalization of inferiority that white supremacy seeks to inflict us with, like Florida Evans holding on to that white Jesus.
Yeah.
That's it. That's indoctrination of white supremacy, right?
That's right.
And we have to break free. It's the only place it's going to happen is in our churches, like through these spaces. And that's what I meant. So when you talk about reading the scripture, it's so important, and this is one I want to advocate, and this might be something that's challenging for a lot of Christians to think about. And what I want to say is, when we think about studying African history, particularly as Christians, many of us are taught, because we've been so indoctrinated from this white Western Christian perspective, that if you do anything with Africa or anything with other traditions, it's evil,
Right.
It's not God, and the way that they talk about, even they did this, of course, with our ancestors when they came
That's
over,
right. That's right. That's right.
All of their practices, they said that it was evil, demonic, and so forth and so on. And of course, they were not. We've got to heal from that. We've got to release that, because what I believe that we should do as we read our Bibles, we need to also familiarize ourselves with the other African text that our ancestors wrote, right?
Right.
The Bible being an African text, and they're even older African
That's right.
text, right?
That's
So in my class last night, which we're actually talking about the Protestant Reformation, and we were talking about in the Western Church, but when the Western Church broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, they began to emphasize scripture, right? Sola scriptura,
Right.
the word alone.
The word alone.
The word alone, right? And one of the things that the reformers did is that they pulled together new Bibles. They did new translations of Bibles from the original languages, and they pulled together new Bibles. And there were certain books from the Catholic Bible that they said, okay, we don't consider this to be canon, right? Scripture. But they included it as the Apocrypha, because they said these books are not scripture, but they are edifying. They're edifying religious text. So this is what I'm positing as our ancient African text. These are edifying texts that we must familiarize ourselves with and read them alongside our Bible, because they enlighten and edify our understanding of the scripture, and they deepen our knowledge and our awareness of self.
No, I'm going to say because that's it. And I know that's going to be tough for some people.
That's going to be tough for some people.
Because we are so tethered to.
That's right.
One, tradition, because half the stuff's not even biblical, is tradition.
That's right.
And the other, to your point, we have been so, I guess, Bobby Wright would say menticide, right? That we have totally given up the mind.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Even though the Bible tells you, love God, your heart, soul, and your mind.
And your mind.
And loving God, your mind is not continue to digest.
That's right. That's right.
What's not good for you.
That's right. That's right.
And so we have to be willing to have assumptions challenged. I know Big Mama probably told you that.
That's it.
And yes, I'm saying Big Mama was wrong.
We have to recognize.
And it's okay because what you do, you understand.
It's okay.
It's okay because you saying Big Mama only knew what she knew.
She knew what she knew.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
We don't take that away because she
did the best she could, and we love her.
Absolutely.
And we honor her. We're thankful for what she did. She worked with what she had.
That's right. And we have more.
That's right.
It's a come us to say, you know what, because she also got a lot right.
That's
right?
Exactly right.
So is that, and I also want to lift up that text, bound books, whatever, is not the only text we read.
That's it.
We also read people or text too.
That's right.
So I would also encourage us to look at like a Fannie Lou Hamer, a Ida Bell Wells Barnett, right? A Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. Read those ancestors as texts as well to understand what it means to be Black and Christian in the world, and to understand that we have to make sure that our version of Christianity,
that's right,
is one that allows us to advocate for, create spaces where justice, peace, love, liberation, and healing is possible and can be lived out.
That's so true.
And so I guess you tell me I need to stop right there, Cheryl. So
thank you.
But we're not done. We're done with this portion, but I gotta go ahead and do the hand clap here, because this has been an amazing conversation. You have dropped so many nuggets that I think people can, for the rest of the year, it's enough to just say, well, let me study this piece she talked about. But what people start to find as you go here, is going to take you here.
That's right.
You'll get the connections.
That's right.
And so thank you for sharing all of that wisdom, that knowledge. You did the academy, but you also came down and told us, look, this is what you need to do when you get that Bible. Get you this other book.
That's it.
And read that alongside. And it's not heresy. It's not demonic.
No.
It's being able to let go of that which somebody has given you to control you.
That's right. That's right.
And I know that's going to be a long haul for some, but we have to continue to speak the truth.
Exactly.
And to tell the truth.
Exactly.
In love. We wouldn't tell you this if we didn't love you.
In love.
And as Malcolm X says, so you don't be, had hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, read amok, going when you don't have to be.
That's right.
So it's so important. So here's what I like to do. Once we do this, all the serious topic conversation we have to have, I just know you're more than Dr. Tamara Lewis, professor, researcher, scholar. Tell us what brings you joy. What do you do for fun? What do you do just like, I'm not doing Scholar Day, I'm doing Tamara today. What is that?
Well, you wouldn't believe it, or maybe you would. But one of the things that I just absolutely love to do is I love to roller skate.
Come on now, okay.
So I love to roller skate. Now, I'm like so many of us. I grew up roller skating, and of course we went to the roller rink. But in my neighborhood where I grew up, we roller skated on the street outside. Like we just
right.
wherever we could, right? So that brings me so much joy. Now, I love to go to a roller rink with my friends, and I try to dance. I'm not the most coordinated person. I've never been. That's not my gift, right?
Right.
God, but I will get out there, and I have a good time. And I have learned that, you know what? I'm doing me.
Do you.
And I am jamming, and I am moving, and I might fall, but I am just having a good time. And I've reached that point where I don't care what you might look at me and say, oh, she's lacking in the rhythm department.
Yeah.
But that's okay, right? I'm having a good time. So that's one of the things I just absolutely love to do.
So you know what that means? That means you free.
That's it. That's right. It took a while to get here, too.
Yes. It is, or as my colleague would say, you a free Negro.
A free Negro. I love it.
And free Negroes move differently.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
We move differently, and that's problematic for the system.
It is.
But thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
We're going to leave it there. Dr. Tamara Lewis, thank you for being with us today. This has been a very robust and very rich conversation. We have to continue. Obviously, this can't happen in an hour, but we hope we did our part to at least get it going. And we would love to even maybe we think about the ways in which you come to the church and do some type of sessions, on like a series, maybe a 3-night series or something, where we really begin to unpack and how people to be able to think and listen and to learn together. We all bring our bricks and we build this together. So listen, we are excited about this week's program, this week's classroom. It's super excited. I learned so much. I saw Cheryl taking notes over there feverishly. But I'll go back and listen to it to catch some of this because I didn't catch all of it because I was too busy talking too. But thank you again, Dr. Tamara.
Thank
and
you
I didn't
for having
know you
me.
lived in Memphis. I grew up in Memphis.
Did you grow up in Memphis? So
Yes.
so we lived in Memphis for 2 years. It was in the 80s.
Okay.
Were you there? So
We moved there in 84.
we were there 83 to 85.
Okay.
We lived in Raleigh.
I did too. Off Covington Pike. I went to Craigmont.
I went to Craigmont.
When?
I went to Craigmont it had to have been, it was when we were there. It was 83 and 84.
So I think we moved.
I'm older than you.
Okay, so you probably missed because we moved. I started junior high school at Craigmont. Or what's ninth grade?
I was in.
No, I wasn't in ninth grade. I started 8th grade.
What year? What year was you in 8th grade? Is that like 90s?
This is
or
going to be
something?
published.
So you want me to tell the people how?
Oh no, I'm sorry.
No,
See, like
I'm
that's too
good.
much business.
Hey,
But let me tell you. So yeah, I'm giving my age, but no, I went to Craigmont. Now see, we just discovered something on air about each other. I went to Craigmont, and I was in Craigmont in the 9th grade and 10th grade.
Well, yeah, I graduated from Craigmont.
I didn't graduate. We moved.
Because you moved.
Yeah, we moved.
That's wild. That's wild. All right, listen. Make sure you share family. You see how much fun we have while we have real conversation, but we also want to have fun too because life is about it all. We want to be what you call Renaissance people.
That's
we want to be able to talk up here, come down here, but we also are a lot of fun. We're well-rounded people that God has called us to be. So make sure you share Family's Classroom. Make sure you let folks know where we are. They can like us on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure they hit that notification bell so you can be alerted when we go live. And Cheryl's going to show us now.
Oh, I am?
We now have a little bit of merchandise that can help support Family Loose Classroom. We have this nice T-shirt that's available for purchase. You can just go into the box on our YouTube, our description box on our YouTube channel. Click that link and order your Family Loose Classroom T-shirt. It goes to help support the work that we're trying to do here and the amazing guests that we bring to you. We try to bring you the best who know their craft, who know the issues, who can talk to it in very practical ways. And so, we just want to make sure we can continue to do this podcast so we all might be edified and made better for spending just a little bit of time together during the weekend with the hopes that we're all going back and doing our own work and research and learning on our own as well. So until again next Thursday at noon, we'll see you then. Be blessed.
From the church house.